Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, July 28th, 2026, Washington County Board of Commissioners work session. Clerk Moss, could you please take the roll?
Certainly, Chair Harrington. Commissioner Snyder?
Here.
Commissioner Fye?
Present.
Commissioner Treese?
Here.
Vice Chair Willie?
Here.
Chair Harrington?
Here. Great. We're going to dive right into our very first topic. So I'd like to invite Marnie Kyle and Jason Bush up to the table. Thank you for joining us. As I recall, this is a follow-on to a conversation that we started maybe through board communication, about 4+ weeks ago. So really appreciate your developing material to help us all have a common understanding, as well as to give us further information based on some of the questions and information requests we expressed way back when. So please take it away.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and board. As you said, I'm Marnie Kyle. I'm one of the assistant county administrators. I'm joined today by Jason Bush, Deputy County Counsel. And as you can see, there are many subject matter experts in the audience who were instrumental in putting this information together. Stephen Roberts also is one of the subject matter experts, but he is doing his civic duty and at jury duty selection process, and had hoped he would be here, but I didn't see him yet. But so this does represent a one Washington County approach, because enterprise zones and the subtopic of data centers are complex topics. They have tentacles throughout the organization in assessment and taxation, economic development. That's how I thought of it. Yeah, I'm like, is that the right word? But
Apropos.
Yeah, you can visualize that. Land use, county council, government relations, communication staff, and the county administrative office. So our purpose today, and I want to be really clear about this, our purpose today is to provide you information for your board. We are not here as staff making any recommendations. We are not advocating against or for enterprise zones or data centers. Our role is to simply provide accurate information as we understand it today from our roles, from looking at national data, from looking at Oregon data, and reviewing the statutes. We are also not requesting your board to take any specific action or to provide any specific direction today. However, we are always happy to follow up on any board questions or direction. As you can see from the agenda today, we plan to define and describe enterprise zones in Washington County, including fiscal impacts, board and staff authorities and roles. We also will do the same for data centers, including acknowledgement, not resolving, not addressing community concerns, but just acknowledging and providing information based on those concerns. We'll also do a short review of statewide policy, our communication plan, and most importantly, we're hoping to allow your board time to have questions and any board directed conversation. With that, I'll turn it over to Jason to get us kicked off with what is an enterprise zone?
What are enterprise zones? So briefly, enterprise zones are an economic tool defined or to attract and retain businesses. I think the best way to view this is really from Business Oregon. On their website, they have an expression for this, or statement that says enterprise zones are incentivize new business investment by abating all local taxes for a certain number of years. And really, that's what we're talking about, is the exchange of giving up some tax abatement, ultimately so that we can have economic investment. If you go to that second point, the temporary property tax abatement on eligible new investments is covered over a geographic area, and this is actually covered in a separate statute, 285C090, where the area needs to be defined, and there are a number of specific requirements for that, such as 50% of the households within that area need to make at least are less than 80% of the state income, as well as the unemployment rate needs to be 2% greater than the entire state average. So obviously it's designed to promote economic activity in areas that might not be as strong economically as other parts of the state. And then there's also some statutory requirements regarding the size of the zone, such as a zone cannot be greater than 12 square miles in theory, going from there. So it is a defined economic area. Beyond that, the history of the EZs, we know that they began in 1985, statute and the history changed over time. Most recently, we have seen the implementation of HB 44, which does a number of things to change potentially the potential nature of enterprise zones, specifically in extending the time period of the abatement from 3 to 5 years up to a period of 10 years. And beyond that, there's the secondary piece that's particularly valuable for us today, which is that HB 4084 did implement the moratorium on data centers, which will run through, it's not quite, well, it's actually a little bit longer than a year, but 90 days after the end of next year's legislative session. Okay. Next slide. So enterprise zones in Washington County. First, so you can see the numbers. There's 73 total enterprise zones in Oregon. Approximately 2/3 or a little bit more than that are in rural areas at 55. And then there are 18 urban ones. Specific to Washington County, you can see from the map attached to the slide that we have 2 that are existing in Washington County currently, with 1 in Beaverton and then 1 in Hillsborough. The gray areas on the graph represent the unincorporated areas for which we have to get consent for those 2. As a secondary matter, we did have a 3rd enterprise zone that as of June 2026 wasn't reauthorized to go forward, and that's in Forest Grove and Cornelius.
Could you repeat what you were saying, the gray areas? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so those areas are unincorporated parts of the county. So if you look at that Beaverton section, that would include like Tektronix and Nike, which technically is unincorporated. But those areas were granted consent by the county to be part of
An
that
enterprise
designated
zone.
enterprise zone.
And do you know what years those are?
That's
You
a
can
good
get later.
question. I believe that we just reauthorized Beaverton in like the last,
We'll follow up with.
yeah,
Yeah,
we can
that's
follow
fine.
up.
I can
Right,
try.
right.
Yeah. So we'd like the chronological.
So is the Tiger Lake Oswego zone not still operating?
Okay, those are the only,
Those are
I
the
see
only
a lot of
2.
shaking heads now.
Yeah. there are only 2.
So could
Who's-
you also repeat on the Forest Grove enterprise zone was not extended?
Yes, so
Just repeat what you said.
right, so the zone expired as of June 2026,
Got it.
meaning that they didn't seek reauthorization.
Got it.
Legally, what will happen is that you can still have investments in that zone up to the 10 years. For your companies that have applied can get that abatement for 10 years, and then the entire program will be over at that point. So there's still 10 years from the point at which the reauthorization was not extended.
Okay, so that expiration didn't end the opportunity for companies to invest in that
Right.
10 years. Rather, it totally sunsets the program, so to speak, within, at the end of that 10 years.
That is correct.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So
Does that mean the new businesses could buy?
Yes. That's exactly what it means.
I think you already have to be in the program as of the date. So we had some applications that came in this year that were authorized. Those companies will have to do the filings year over year, but I don't believe we can accept new applications.
Oh, so
Okay.
they have within that 10 years, they
Right.
have to exercise it, but they had to have applied before
the
that
expiration.
expiration.
That was the
That is
governor's. That was the governor's.
Lincoln?
Wait, no, we're talking about the Forest Grove case.
Talking about enterprise zones.
Okay,
So I think, for clarity,
you'll follow up.
we'll capture this as a needed follow-up.
Yep.
Because we want to be sure that we're precise.
You should check in on the fire thing too, because I think it's still active.
Okay.
So, there's another point within any individual enterprise zone, there are certain policies that can be covered or created by the zone sponsor, and those relate to wages and employment. We will talk about this a little bit more in depth in the future slides, but it is worth noting that this changes a little bit from zone sponsor to zone sponsor. So here, Beaverton doesn't have a minimum wage requirement, and Hillsborough requires a wage of 102% of the minimum wage. Here's one.
That doesn't
Agree.
match what the mayor just told me in a meeting this morning.
Well, I would have to double check that, but yeah.
Which doesn't match the 102%.
No, that Beaverton does have a minimum wage of $19 an hour.
Which could be 100 and, well, actually, minimum wage
Higher
is
than that.
15.85, so 102% would not make it 19. Okay.
So
Yeah.
we'll follow up on that. Our information is coming from documents that they provide as part of the enterprise zone.
So I think you'll see staff through this presentation saying follow up, because I just want to take a moment to underscore, because we want to ensure that there is accurate information and not misinformation. So the follow up Q&A that staff provide to you as a board, we will attach that to this agenda item so it's accessible to the public as well, should the public watch this portion of the meeting.
So, sponsorship. Ultimately, there's on this slide, we're talking about three different potential jurisdictions and their roles within the program: the city, the county, and the port. Currently, as you know, Washington County is not a zone sponsor. However, we have given consent. When we look at what that responsibility will look like in terms of a zone sponsor and how the county's role might impact other jurisdictions, you can see from the graph. So under the city box, if you will, the county doesn't have any responsibility in the creation of a zone if it's entirely within the city. The zone is proposed and recommended to Business Oregon, who then signs off on that, on the eligibility of that. And that's 285C 065, subsection 3. And the area in situations where there's an unincorporated parts of the county that are implemented, as we see from Beaverton, Hillsborough, there is a requirement that the zone sponsor get consent from the other governing body, in this case, the county, under ORS 285C 115, subsection 7. That's something that we've traditionally done in the past at that 10-year reauthorization period. Normally, the scope of what the county could negotiate to give consent is quite limited, and we actually haven't given conditions on consent in the past. There is a statute, which is 285C 070, that talks about, this is really the only place this comes up, that if there's a separate unincorporated area, whether there's a designation to make hotels, motels, and resorts an eligible business subject to an enterprise zone under that section, which doesn't necessarily have to match a city. Going to the second category for the county, here, this would be a situation where the county was to become a zone sponsor and create a zone. So to start with, the board directs staff to create a zone. The board would, so then we'd make a recommendation to see what that will look like. We'd have to get approval from the state, and then within that, we'd have to set specific policy. And you might be wondering what that policy looks like. So under 285C 150, they talk about the conditions for a zone. And there's a number of things. So one, the fee, as some of you might be aware, you can have a fee up to 0.1% of the total investment on your application. And in this case, I'm tying it to data centers for a second. If we're talking about $1 billion investment, that is a very large fee. So in Hillsborough, we have the $50,000 fee, of which half of that would be shared with the county. If we're at 0.1% on like $1 billion, the fee would be much, much higher than that. So in theory, we could have a higher fee as part of the policy. There's also conditions for monitoring, and there's conditions for employment, and there's conditions for wages that can be set. It is worth noting that per business Oregon, you really can't discriminate on the type of business within a zone. So you can't say we want distribution warehouses, but we don't want mustard manufacturers, for instance. So there are definitely limitations on what you can and cannot do within a zone.
Jason, could I just ask a clarifying question about this? I meant to say chair, not. When you use the term board in these 3 columns, you are referring to
Yes, and
this commission, this board. Yeah, I just want to make sure I understood that.
a good point, Commissioner.
Thank you.
But yes, that would be this board. Okay. So, and then there is the third category, port, whereas if the port did create a zone in Washington County, they would need our consent. And then once again, we wouldn't necessarily be able to set policy there. And it's also worth noting between these 3 that something that we see across the state is that while we give consent, other jurisdictions, it's the combination of multiple cities or a city and a county that are zone sponsors. So that it can be more than one entity that are joined together to create an enterprise here.
Do we have a process to create a zone? Or is that something we would have to start all over?
We've never created a zone here, so it would be something that we would have to implement kind of from the ground up. I mean, obviously there are lots of zones existing, so we most likely borrow from some of the existing language out there, and then Business Oregon is involved. This is something they do regularly, so we probably work with them to implement that.
So succinctly, we do not have a current policy. So that would need board direction. I will say we have not been approached to and I'm saying this about being a zone sponsor. And I don't want to say if ever, but just this is not a pending issue from a immediacy concern.
Well,
I would say the most similar is like your SIP policy that you adopted, which is an economic development related policy.
doesn't it go back to the definition of what an enterprise zone is, right? To encourage business investment. And so where are businesses? They're either in commercial zones or industrial zones. Yep. And we have some commercial areas, but other than where Intel Aloha is, we don't have any other industrial areas that I recall in the unincorporated areas.
And when we talk a little bit about some of the land use issues, we're going to touch on that a little bit, but you're pretty
Generally correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because these other ones are, like the Beaverton one is historic as part of the whole, city, whole industrial area. And a lot of what I'm seeing here on the map slide with Hillsborough tends to be where the UGB expansions have been and the annexation into the city over the course of time. So, and yeah. I just can't tell. Is that Huffman? Yeah. Really? Oh. Okay.
We're going to jump into the staff side, so staff roles and process. So A assessment and taxation's role is limited in reviewing enterprise zone applications for legal compliance and to track and administer annual filings. The authorized business firm, after an application has been approved. Staff role is the same regardless of a project being within a city or an unincorporated area. After an application is submitted to the zone sponsor and the zone sponsor and authorized business firm come to agreement on the contract, the county is notified and invited to attend a pre-authorization conference with the applicant. During that pre-authorization conference, that's where we can identify any outstanding concerns, and there's an opportunity to discuss the administration, reporting, and compliance of the enterprise zone. So you'll see the next box is assessor approves. I'm going to skip that for a moment because I have a separate slide because it's such an important understanding. So I'm going to jump over to annual compliance and tracking. This is the most labor intensive part of the process and where legal appeals can be brought. The business firm reports the enterprise zone claim form annually to the county with an associated property schedule, which should delineate all assets that are to be included in the enterprise zone abatement or retired assets that need to be clawed back and assessed. This is the biggest administrative burden. The annual cost for county staff to administer an enterprise zone application and the annual reporting is approximately $6,700 per year per application. And then the last box that you see on this slide is reporting. The county does report annually to Business Oregon and the Department of Revenue. The reporting is done each July 1st. Things that are included on the report are employment number, wages, exempt assessed value, abated tax amounts for each business firm, any new investments made by the firm, and then value coming back onto the tax roll.
Can I just make sure I heard you correctly? On the annual compliance and tracking, this is the biggest administrative burden, approximately $6,700 per year.
So the $6,700 per year is really the cost that we attribute to full administration of the enterprise zone.
Yep.
So from attending that pre-conference through reporting, but the biggest burden within all of these boxes is that annual compliance and tracking.
Yep.
So $6,700 per year
Per application.
per application,
Correct.
not ongoing.
Well, that's where I was trying to follow up
So-
because in our last meeting, you talked about there's the initial application, but a company, if I understood
Yeah.
it and remember it correctly, that a company they can have like 5 years or so
And-
to exercise it, but that once they say, yep, it's time, we're exercising it, then they go and they construct it, and every year after that, you have to do the reassessment stuff.
Yes, and you're remembering a graphic that you're going to see here
terrific.
again in 2 slides.
Okay, okay.
But now I don't have to talk about it because
Yes, you do.
explained it wonderfully.
No. Please take me through it all again.
Okay, so this is that slide. This is the box that I skipped on the last slide. So this is about the assessor's role in approving the enterprise zone. And so the words are actually on the slide. This is taken right out of statute, and we double checked and triple checked that these are the exact words. So following the pre-authorization conference, the county assessor shall authorize the business firm by approving the application if the sponsor and county assessor determine that the current or proposed operation of the business firm in the enterprise zone result in the firm being eligible under ORS 285C.135 and the firm has made the commitments and provided other information required under statute. So if they meet statute, we shall approve.
Yep.
So if the zone sponsor or the county assessor fails or if it refuses to authorize the business firm, the firm may appeal to Oregon Tax Court. Now on to the familiar slide. So I think this will help with the question that you have. So this is an example of a single company with 3 separate enterprise zone applications with also a construction and process exemption and multiple investment periods. So we're going to start with construction and process exemption. Enterprise zone applicants making an investment can receive a construction and process exemption for up to 2 years as long as the building is not placed in service. This is in addition to the 5-year investment exemption. This means that each investment with an application can receive a tax exemption for up to 7 years. And with the passage of 4084, it contemplates extending that exemption period for up to 10 years. So once placed in service, up to 2 years of construction and process, after the 2 years of construction and process, the company has a maximum of 3-year window to place assets into service. Each year of investment receives its own 5-year exemption. So you can kind of follow along as you see investment 1, investment 2, investment 3. For instance, in application 1, the company pays their total investment over the 3-year period. However, an investment made in that 4th year would not qualify for the exemption because it falls outside of the designated 3-year investment window for that application, which is why they sometimes apply for concurrent applications. Okay. Concurrent applications allow for additional new investments to account for the length of time for like a large project, like a large data center construction project with multiple buildings to be completed. So as each investment year ages out of its 5-year exemption, the property will be assessed and taxed normally and would not qualify for future exemptions. However, this is complex, so sorry for the long explanations. However, personal property like servers could be potentially assessed for a year. They could be retired and removed, and then the firm could apply for new application for a new wave of servers or personal property within the facility. This would be considered new property and potentially qualify for a new enterprise zone exemption, assuming that they meet the employment requirements. This does not apply to real property or buildings, as the buildings aren't easily removed or replaced.
And I would just add on that, like a lot of the work that A&T does is in this section because we have to make sure that assets aren't being double reported across different authorizations. Like you can see in that example, that at one time you can have 3 different authorizations with multiple investment years for one individual company or corporation. So checking sure to make sure that the investments are in the correct investment year and that they're in the correct authorization, not being double counted, that there's no clawbacks or retirements. Like a lot of the work is in that part, frankly.
But unlike SIP, this isn't about depreciation. It's about a schedule that's set for the enterprise zone. Is that correct?
So the enterprise zone it's a total abatement, and they negotiate fees with the enterprise zone sponsor. So it's not necessarily
There's no
based.
Yeah, so there's no cap in a sense, such that we're looking at to see if like a bucket is full, similar in SIP, since it is 100% abated. So really the key relative to SIP is the timing piece. We just want to make sure you have the right asset and the right authorization over the right time. Yeah,
It's also
exactly.
And it's also, isn't it also separate from their federal depreciation as well? That's totally separate. But with the changes in the big beautiful bill,
Oh, the changes, the tax related changes.
Yeah,
Um,
changes their,
yeah, it's a great question. I
Appreciation.
believe you're probably right, but we'll take that down too, because I think that's an
So-
interesting.
I just want to
Yeah.
make sure we're not, we as the county with assessment and taxation, we're not having to get involved with their federal depreciation. So they can have their federal depreciation and they can have this tax abatement.
I would
Yes.
say like depreciation is, well, like two
Complicated.
parts. So if we're looking in the data center context, and this is something that A&T has done recently over the last like 3 years, we moved from a cost approach for valuing it on what it costs to build or how much it costs to produce to how much income would be generated from, let's just say like a data center, right? And when you move from one model to another model, when it comes out of exemption, we don't look at depreciation quite the same way because we're looking at what's the income generation capacity, almost like an apartment building, when it comes onto the roll, right? So that also differentiates this from SIP, where I think all of SIP, for the most part, with some exceptions, is going to be on a cost depreciation schedule because it's special purpose. But we have enough data centers, we have a market of data centers, we kind of know like what the rent price is, how much it costs to construct. We have those type of factors where we don't necessarily automatically put it on a cost basis. Oh, is that right? Yeah. Okay, I'm getting some.
The only
head
reason
nods.
I bring it up is because I've heard from other folks that one reason why there have been these multiple applications over this period of time is because of the new federal tax incentives around depreciation that are being provided through that bill. And I'm not trying to understand all the complexities of it at all, but that's been a motivation for why we've seen this really higher level of applications to process. That's all.
But the rules here are strictly around the SIP.
Yes.
And that's state.
Yes.
That's state. Yep.
Just want to make sure I'm.
Marnie, before you move on that, I do have a question about this slide.
Mhm.
Just so I'm grounded in this slide, what, by the way, I appreciate this slide. I thought this slide was really a great way depicting the level and
Mhm.
how complex this is, the applications and the times they come in. So I appreciate this slide very well. Now, the annual work and the years that you've listed on this slide, does it actually reflect annual work done by the county, or is this a hypothetical sample?
So both. It's a hypothetical sample, but it's based on an enterprise zone model that we have. And so I think what you're sort of alluding to, what it shows, the way I describe it, is kind of the compounding work, because as one year comes on, and then by next year you might have 2 or 3, and then the next year you might have 6. And so it is showing each year how remember, this is a single company. And what did we say? We had 18 enterprise zones with multiple companies. So I think that's kind of what we're trying to demonstrate here.
There's a lot of work, a lot of process, and it snowballs,
Yes,
or at least the snowball doesn't get smaller.
right.
Go ahead. I have follow-up, but I'll let Commissioner.
This is one company represented.
One sample depiction of one sample company.
So, how many of our companies have more than 3 applications, or is this like an average of those 18?
I don't know how many have more than 3, but
I just want this
almost
inspiration.
all of the companies have more than one application.
That's helpful.
Yeah, puts it in perspective.
And the follow-up question I have is, I think we've covered, this is my favorite slide, but how do we understand, I get that this is hypothetical and a sample, how do we, as a Board of Commissioners, understand the fiscal impact to the county so that we can articulate it, the annual work, compliance, and the tracking, and the magnitude that you've expressed here in this meeting?
That is a perfect segue, I
Okay.
think, into the next slide. Let's see if this answers your question. If not, we'll come back to it. So, so this slide is really kind of talking about what are the community concerns. And one of the
No, it's a separate question. This isn't about the impacts to the community. This question she's asking relates to the same one I was asking earlier.
Okay.
What does it cost the county each year, because we have to do this work as indicated back on the previous slide every single year?
What does one
the-
box represent?
so the
Exactly.
so it's so we will get the number of the total number of applications times $6,700 per year. And then why I thought this slide might help, because this slide shows how much taxes abated. And so the cost to us is the $6,700 per application per year. And then this is the amount of tax that is abated.
Two separate topics.
It is, but part of it is showing that it's costing us to do this program, and we're not only, so we're only getting revenue from one city. The city of Hillsborough has an agreement with us where they are providing revenue that covers our costs
Every single year?
every
or
single
only with the
year.
initial application.
It covers it because they're giving us half of the
It was previously explained to us that they only provided for the initial application and not all the subsequent years.
but the initial application is covering the costs of a 5-year abatement. So if according to the information I've been given, I mean, it's waffling, but the latest information that I have is that the current 5-year abatement, the city of Hillsborough's application fee is covering our costs or the annual cost.
6,700 is approximately what that fee is.
Exactly.
That where you're that's
Yes.
what you're trying to
Yes.
what you're meaning.
Yes.
Did you track that, Chair?
Yes?
32.
So the city gives us a 3-year abatement. I'm sorry for the 3-year abatement.
Follow-up document.
Yeah, follow up. Yeah. And can you remind me, Hillsborough, we get half the application, which is how much? 25,000.
Follow-up and document.
No, so the application fee is 50,000. They provide 25,000 to us. So that's what I'm saying. For the 3-year abatement, it's covering our costs. So our costs in this slide shows again, our cost is $20,000 for 3 exemption applications. We're getting 25,000 from Hillsborough. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out how you came up with $20,100 out of 6,700.
I don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly, yes. Okay. So as we start talking about community concerns, one of the things I want to be really clear about is that with this information, we're just acknowledging what their concerns are and what we know about those concerns. We are not proposing that we can address or fix those community concerns. And you can see by each concern. So for example, countywide, all taxing revenue reductions, that is based on state policy. So it's not something that we can change. The general concerns about abatement, again, state and enterprise zone policy. But as you can see, there are revenue reductions. These revenue reductions that are shown here for 2020 through 2025, those are all taxing district revenue reductions,
Including school districts.
including school districts, but remember, school districts are made,
Well, I understand that.
right?
School districts, port and metro.
Yeah.
And the
So,
county.
yeah, so as an organization, that would be about 15% that would have come to our organization. So an example, in 2025, our organization, we would receive roughly 13.5 million if there was not an abatement. So it is a significant abatement that the county sees when these enterprise zones are adopted. So let's talk a little bit about the purpose of the tax abatement. And I know that you all know this, but part of this is also to help our community understand. Jason mentioned it a bit, but it's incentives or short-term and base abatements that provide long-term benefits. So the hope is that a company would anchor in the community. It generates revenue for local governments to pay for services and income tax generated that goes to the state and thereby the school districts. Investments required for a company to locate in a given area are often cost prohibitive, and the purpose of these incentives is to encourage that economic activity that benefits the community over time, increasing our tax base in the long term. So the programs like the enterprise zones are developed in partnership between, as it's happening in Washington County, between the cities and the companies. And so it really is, as Jason kind of mentioned earlier, an economic development goal. So moving on to land use.
One question, we've talked about the applications for enterprise zones. Do we know what percentage of those applications are data centers? And you may be getting to that in the next. I think that there's a propensity to look at this enterprise zone conversation and think that it's all about data centers. And I just want to clarify that it is not, and that there are other activities that happen within enterprise zones.
And
So it is not. And that's why this presentation is intentionally separated out in two sections. One, enterprise zones, and two, data centers. And I just want to repeat that, even though Marnie had said that, just so it's very clear also to the public. As far as the composition of our enterprise zones, we will put that on a FAQ as a follow-up, just so that we're clear.
When you say the composition of enterprise zones,
like
what's in them, right?
Correct. The types of businesses within enterprise zones.
Yeah, so we have the numbers for each.
You're not there. If you're not on that slide yet, hold it, please.
No, I'm just saying, so previously on the enterprise zones in Washington County, we give a number of enterprise zones. And when I get to data centers, I'll tell you the number of data centers, but I don't have a percentage. So to get back to that. Yeah.
Well, as your slide says, you have 18 urban enterprise zones in Washington County.
No, in the state.
In the state.
That is
In the state.
This is
We have
state.
We have
This is
two
federal.
enterprise
That's true.
zones.
That's true. 55 rural ones.
We have two enterprise zones in Washington County.
Yeah.
One in Hillsborough, one in Beaverton. And they're checking. So the proportion that are data centers, I don't have, but I have
see.
the number of data centers. So, okay. So, moving on to land use. When enterprise zones are created, there can be concerns about the large area of limited industrial lands that are used by businesses that qualify for an enterprise zone tax abatement, but may not represent the highest and best use of land within that enterprise zone. So efforts to shape the allowed types of uses have proven challenging because it requires development codes to include clear definitions, create exclusions, which can oftentimes over-exclude and require staff capacity to keep that up to date. This isn't a concern that's limited to data centers, but has really long-standing debate about development outcomes in the state, particularly in our industrial or employment areas. And just a reminder again, because this slide I'm going on quite a bit, this is really kind of articulating what we're hearing from community around community concerns. And I think if you were able to listen a bit or read the Hillsborough documents from yesterday's meeting, you'll see clearly that this is one of the concerns that they want to like pause and take a look at. Is this the best use of our land within those industrial and employment areas?
But that isn't for us as a county to determine.
No. And again, that's why I'm saying I'm just acknowledging these are these are community concerns that you're all hearing about, that we're hearing about. But once again, we're not sponsors. And so we're not here to suggest that you can address them. So thank you for bringing that up again. So the other concern that we hear often is job creation and pay. So anytime there's an abatement program, there's always concern that the abated values do not create enough jobs or that the job wages are not high enough. In 2022, Business Oregon completed a fiscal analysis on property tax abatement incentives compared to personal income tax returns and concluded in Oregon that the enterprise zones provide mixed results depending on if the zone is a standard or long-term rural zone. What they have seen is that the highest investment does come from standard enterprise zones, and that can provide a return on investment of $1.35 in income tax for each dollar abated. So it's really a mixed bag. However, policies, as you heard from at least from we verified from Hillsborough, that they can set policies that set employment wage criteria. So I'm going to pause here because this is kind of the end of us talking about enterprise zones, and just see if you have any other questions. And then Jason is going to kick us off and shift the discussion to data centers.
Questions or comments? I'm hoping.
Certainly.
Okay. Sure.
Yes.
I think what I want to say about this, and slide 10 is a good looking at how much tax is being abated each year, and the way that trajectory is going. And what I mean, we'll learn later how much of it's being used for various things. But from my perspective, over the last couple of years, it's pretty clear to me that the enterprise zone program as an economic development tool is starting to be, from my perspective, given the goals, somewhat misused. There's a very low bar to qualify on job creation and wages. When I first learned of these programs when I was a Tigard City Councilor and we were approving the zone there, the classic examples of these things were businesses that made stuff, needed people to work making this stuff, had to make large capital investments that would be valuable to the community for decades. Those jobs had to meet certain criteria. I find the criteria pretty low bar. I'm making a policy judgment there, but I'm saying that because I think that's true. I think what's also interesting is that the investments that these are being used for now, many of them are investments that depreciate very rapidly compared to the example I just provided. So how much benefit does the community really get in the long run when someone uses this to build something that then rapidly depreciates and isn't worth much value by the time you get done with the abatement process?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because what I'm seeing the use of in Beaverton is different than what I'm seeing in the use of Hillsborough.
Yeah.
And so, and there are follow-ups on the criteria is different in each of those cities.
Mhm.
So,
My comment about the criteria specifically is related to the Hillsborough criteria.
thank
just
you
to
for
be-
clarifying.
Just to be clear, but I think that's where more of the misguided use or misuse of this from my policy perspective is coming from. So all that just leads me to conclude and question whether there's long-term community benefit here or not. And I know that's not the conversation we're having, and it's not our job other than maybe from a government relations perspective and a trying to advocate in Salem perspective. But that's just where, as I've reflected on this and I'm looking at your presentation and the data, that's what I want to share. I would like us to encourage the state to be moving more towards things, hopefully that are simple, but also effective and incentivize the activity we want to incentivize.
So that would be a future discussion
Yep.
for the board.
Absolutely.
But I think we also have a follow-up, which would require information from both cities about the criteria that they require for their applications. Because I did have a meeting with Mayor Beatty this morning. This was just one of the many topics we were touching on. And within the last 15 years, the state statute changed so that cities were required to update their enterprise zone criteria with regard to things like wage levels and whatnot. And so it gave me a further appreciation about how they can be different. And so that's where I think before I want to participate in us having a discussion about how we might make a move on our legislative agenda, I would want to further understand what decisions they've made about establishing their criteria for enterprise zone application, because just because they have an enterprise zone doesn't mean that that every application fits the criteria that they've made for their enterprise zone. Okay, others who have questions or comments?
The question related to Commissioner Snyder's comment. Jason, you said early in the presentation that the criteria at the state level included a economic demographic number as well as an unemployment number. Is that correct?
That is correct, to establish the zone.
Okay. So, and that's to establish the zone. So the two zones that we're talking about, Hillsborough and Beaverton, were established many years ago. So,
But the statute was also updated sometime in the last 15 years as well. So even though an enterprise zone may have been previously established,
it had to continue to qualify.
the state changed the statute that required cities to update their codes, is my understanding.
Okay. And that's a clarification I'd like to make sure.
Yeah. The question being asked here in my mind is, does the zone have to keep qualifying? I'm actually not sure that's the case, that the zone has to keep meeting once it's established. It has to keep meeting, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But I think that should be answered as part of Commissioner Tree's question.
I believe it has to be reauthorized every 10 years.
And it
but we
has to
had
meet the criteria then?
Right, and at that point, it would have to meet the criteria going forward.
We'll add that to that basis.
Yeah,
Thank you.
because you also, the city's program has to meet the criteria that's required by the state. But that does, I also want to find out, does the state provide the floor, but a city can go higher than that, right? So it's, it's really, the reason that I want to know more is because of the effect that it has on county and other taxing districts for the abatement. Not because I'm trying to question that they have the authority to do that, because they do under state law, but because the effect has gotten greater and greater over the course of time. That's where I want to better understand it. And find out if it's moved from cases where there's higher levels of employment and higher levels of wages in the local community versus lower. And it can be different, as I understand it, from one city to another city. So. Okay, you were following up on his. Any other questions or comments?
I want clarification on, you said something about $1.35 versus $1, and I want to make sure I heard that correctly.
That was, find it again, we get it right. So that was, Business Oregon, fiscal analysis on the tax abatement. And they were saying that the highest return on investment comes from a standard enterprise zone, providing $1.35 in income taxes for each dollar that's abated.
Yeah, and I think the important part of that is income taxes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because
I think
we
this is
pay-
property tax.
Yes.
we
Yeah, I
pay
didn't catch that.
we give up our property tax and the state gets
Gets the income.
income tax revenues. And
Right.
so hence what started with gain share many
Yeah.
years ago. Now that's been capped. That absolutely has to be revisited. If we are going to entertain this, we're picking up the tab and they're making the money. And so I want to make sure that that point is very clear.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah,
Yes.
neither did I.
Pointing that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Only a CPA would catch that.
Been around it a while.
It goes to my gross generalization statement that the state legislators only care about state income taxes, and they don't care that it costs
On the
counties
backside.
or cities or any other local government. So it's really sad.
I will add my 2 cents and ask a question or a board question. Marnie and Jason, thank you for this presentation. I think it was very illuminating. I did express my gratitude for that slide, and I do think it had Chair Harrington's fingerprints all over, because I remember reflecting it back of the layout, but it's very helpful. And I have heard from community members that said, okay, this is really helpful to understand the impact to the county. I think you did a fine job of helping us understand this enterprise zone. Policy work is a bit of having a strategic foresight. And I say that because we don't have a zone. Washington County has not created one. And now that Hillsborough exercised a 4-month moratorium on data centers, I think it's fair to anticipate the unincorporated areas being attractive to businesses. And I think it's important that Washington County gets a bit ahead and starts that conversation. So I don't know how the board feels of directing the staff to sort of put that work plan together and see what that would look like. And then come up with the criteria that we're criticizing cities have missed those opportunities, and what does that community benefit look like? And how do we design, an application process that is what the community is complaining about? That is not what so design a application process that isn't what the community are currently expressing frustrations with. So how do we avoid those pitfalls and use these lessons learned and anticipate and be proactive here?
I think we need to pause just for a moment on this and look at each, if we could please go back to the slide that has the map. Okay. Nope.
One more. There you go.
And you also might want to zoom it up on your screens. Let's talk about the Beaverton one. So that big gray area to the upper left includes the Nike campus, and a whole bunch of residential. No, that's 158th. That doesn't have residential. So that's the Nike campus primarily, and to 158. Yeah,
Foods.
no, not in that, not there. Reeser is, no, this is 158th. Reeser is right there. Reeser is in the city already, not in the
Yeah,
AUA.
that was on Murray. I was pointing
Yeah.
to. You're right.
Now, the area to the right of Murray Boulevard, this club,
Mm-hmm. And
That-
south of Murray. Yep.
yeah,
South
so
Murray.
that's Murray. So that's Analog Devices and the old tech, what used to be the old tech campus that is now owned by multiple different companies. Okay, the Nike campus is all part of that 30 years, can't be annexed as of, I don't know, 2002 or something like that, 2005. So what you haven't given us is we'd have to go to a different county map to see where there are commercial or industrial areas for potentially applying an economic development zone. If we wanted to have a redevelopment strategy, which also goes to, we have to see what conflicts there are with the strategic plan, and whatnot. But there's a lot of history around those two blobs in the Beaverton area, and their economic development zone has different criteria in general than the city of Hillsborough, simply based on their history and what they were looking for, as is their right. Now, if we go and we look at the Hillsborough one, the triangle, the rectangle, the polygon above Highway 26 is, let's see, that's Jackson School Road. This is Cornelius Pass Road. Would you agree? Right here?
I'm just so impressed that you know these roads with no
This
information other than that.
is over here to your right.
185th, that, yeah, this one, the right, there's that polygon. So Cornelius Pass Road is to the right, and Brookwood Chute is to the left.
And West Union is at the top.
Yep. So a lot of that was part of that UGB expansion. And so like that lower triangle there is still, I believe, that trailer park, that mobile home trailer park. I believe this other long triangle is either that the storage place with all the RVs.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So some of these areas haven't gone through any development change and therefore haven't been annexed into the city. They're continuing their use under their permitting. And so that's their choice. That's the way our property ownership land use works. They're not required to come in. So now if we go over to the dark gray blob that borders Highway 26 further over, and is this Glencoe over here? I can't remember what.
No,
that's Weibel Creek.
That's the Weibel Creek.
Okay, great. So this is the whole area that was subject to that whole UGB expansion, and urban reserves and all that jazz. So a lot of that big gray area, there are parcels in there that have just not gone through the development process. So they haven't been annexed into the city of Hillsborough. But this follows all of the UGB requirements. They're in the UGB. So that's the only reason they're not yet in the city. It makes absolutely zero sense for us to develop, even if you could have two economic development zones in a geographic area. It makes zero sense for us to do that because all of that land is supposed to go into the city of Hillsborough anyway. So that's why you really have to look at the history of these lands, the UGB expansion, and what's happened over the course of 30 years of legislative history. So whether or not the board wants to have staff do away with other work in order to have a whole new work program on evaluating where are the commercial properties or other industrial properties all over the place in Washington County, to look into an enterprise zone program that might not yield a positive result. So
Given
that's
the way
a
it's set up
totally
right now,
different question.
I would suggest we spend time on that, but
Well,
Well,
I'm raising it because Commissioner Fye is.
sure.
No, I appreciate you, Chair, and I'm very impressed with you and Commissioner Willie, how you know the map. I was having so, but I appreciate that, Chair. I asked that because let's do a scenario here. An application, you know, Hillsborough for the next 4 months isn't accepting any data center applications. Washington County gets one in the unincorporated areas. Then what?
No, we wouldn't. We
You
don't
get an
have-
application that says, I want to put a data center in the unincorporated area. I want to develop, here's my, how does that?
It's not in an
It's-
enterprise zone.
It's not in an enterprise zone. The only two enterprise zones, or three, if Tiger does have one, are in cities. And we've already consented, based upon our strategic plan, UPAAs and so forth, to have those properties that are in a UGB expansion area to be handled by the city of Hillsborough. The city of Tigard, their UGB expansions have not included any new industrial land. The city of Beaverton UGB expansions have not included any new industrial land. Some commercial land, yes, but they haven't defined an enterprise zone for that. So
you don't think I'm gonna
So
agree
just
with you
because
and say, because you know a lot.
community is mixing things up.
Okay, so you don't think that it's not necessary for the unincorporated areas?
I think the other point here is that the
Correct.
county would set the enterprise zone before the application comes in.
Mhm.
So I think what you're thinking is the application comes in, which drives the enterprise zone, and it's the reverse.
That's correct.
So
I-
that's
Enterprise zones exist for communities to incentivize business development, as slide 4 talks about.
And we have had a conversation with LUT because in theory, we could receive an application, a land use permitting application for a data center outside of an enterprise zone in unincorporated Washington County. But for the most part, we have not done a deep dive. We have not studied this, but we really don't think that there is an adequate land availability for the size of data centers that we've been seeing within Hillsborough and Washington County. So we're going to talk a little bit more about data centers and the land use issues. But just to jump to that a little bit, LUT.
Don't jump to that yet. Let's
yeah.
just stay on enterprise zones.
Yeah.
While we're here.
Take it all in.
An enterprise zone.
Do we have anything else on enterprise zones? So just
Nope,
looking
I
at
will
time.
Yeah, I'll hold the question.
Okay. So now we're going to switch topics.
Yes.
Right.
We're not
it
doing
away.
great on time. We are over
We're
time.
over time. Yes.
Yeah. This back half is definitely shorter.
Well, okay.
That's a good thing.
All right. What are data centers? I actually think if you look at the slide,
Hang on for 1 second. For our executive session, do we have anybody coming in that is affected by time certain?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Thank you. So let's take the time and finish this. Thank you. Sorry if I interrupted.
What are data centers? So I think the best place to start from this is actually that bottom point, which is how it's defined in the administrative rule, which defines data centers, meaning real and personal property consisting of buildings or structures specifically designed or modified to house network computers and data transaction processing, the computers contained within or related infrastructure support. So just thinking about that like big picture piece, like, hey, it's an entire network environment designed to support, frankly, servers for processing. It gets to the top line piece. So what happens at data centers? Frankly, they store, process, and transmit digital information. And most commonly, we identify that with developing large language modeling, like an AI, and then cloud storage. So not on people's individual devices, but in the cloud, which is frankly on a data center.
We used to call them ISPs because of the use, but now AI and cloud tech has advanced. So a lot of those ISPs have moved to cloud-based systems. There are still a lot of smaller ISPs around, don't get me wrong, and they're in office buildings and office parks, like off of Cornell Road. You would never know it. They're all over the place.
So I actually want to, well, actually, I will talk about the second or the third point for just a minute, like data centers, warehouse server storage systems, and networking equipment and supporting infrastructure. I think, and I'm going to tie this back to the like why data centers qualify within an enterprise zone, which is a long-standing rule through Business Oregon, and you can think about in terms of what they do. It's in some ways it's actually very similar to a warehouse distribution center, except for data, right?
Yep.
And you store and you transmit. Or if you're Amazon and you're receiving information or receiving packages and sending them out, that's really not a lot of. It's not fundamentally different from data centers, such that it's not an eligible activity that gets into that would disqualify it from an exemption under the enterprise zone. That's all I want to say about that before going to that fourth point, which is like what constitutes the universe of data centers. And for this, and this goes to Chair Harrington's point, is that they actually do really run the gamut from very large facilities to very small facilities. And normally when we're talking about data centers, we're talking about a hyperscale facilities. That's really what people are talking about, the big giant facilities, use a lot of water and power. But practically, what does that mean? So, and this is something that we picked up from assessment and taxation when we value these things, is that they're valued on a megawatt basis. So what does that mean? That means how much energy in one instance of time can be utilized to support the servers that do the computing, the AIs, cloud storage, etc. So we look at it on a megawatt basis. So 1 megawatt, in theory, can power approximately 1,000 servers. And then on the cost side for assessment and taxation, we have a very quick shorthand model that says 1 megawatt of energy capacity cost approximately $10 million to build. So when you think about the sort of the lower limit threshold for a hyperscale facility, that's at minimum 50 megawatts. So 50 megawatts at $10 million per megawatt means that that facility will cost at least $500 million to construct, which in theory would go on the tax roll at least $500 million, right?
And our data centers here are not hyperscale, is that correct?
We do have hyperscale facilities in Washington County. Um,
It's, well, yeah, but I, there's also the Laurel County ones that I'm trying to compare.
Oh,
so,
those are even bigger, the
Yeah.
ones that were in the news in the last couple of days.
right. I guess what I would say, without totally naming names, even though if you drive 126 and you're coming out here, you'll see
QTS.
QTS. They have like 5 buildings over there. And they're well over 100. They're well over 100 megawatts. I think they're approaching like 2 million.
Sure.
like
And when-
two.
And when you talk about the size of them and the buildings, there is the building with all the HVAC and the generators that they use. But there is also the quote unquote, there's a question, trying to use the right phraseology, the personal property inside, all of the servers and the server racks and everything.
Yes, that's exactly right.
So what you described is all encompassing.
That is correct. So, and there's
Because they
definitely,
could build the shell of the building, but not populate it until subsequent years,
yes,
right?
that is, and it can take multiple years to build and come online. And that's, if you go back to that graph, and so it's construction and process, like a lot of that will be building structure, machinery and equipment. And then you will bring in the individual servers later on in cages. And actually, if you look across the country, there's actually different ways that you can value that. Like Midwest, they use something called a powered shell approach, where they try to separate the building structure from the internal personal property components on the inside. And there's just a lot of different ways to look at it. But the main thing is like we do have large scale facilities in Washington County over in the hyperscale scale range. And Commissioner Treese, as you pointed out, QTS would qualify as one of those because I believe they're approaching 200 megawatts on that facility alone. So, yeah,
Can I ask in terms of, do the counties have discretion in how they do the assessment and taxation? Or is that the state decides and then the county applies?
that's a very
'Cause
good
you
question.
just talked about a different state approach.
Yes. So data centers are not centrally assessed in Oregon. They're assessed, well, at least the ones in Washington County are not centrally assessed. We do.
What
the
does that
assessment.
mean centrally assessed?
So for certain types of property that are industrial, the Department of Revenue makes the determination that they are going to be the party that assesses them. You can think of like Intel.
Yep.
We don't assess Intel. The Department of Revenue assesses Intel, and they tell us what the value is. And obviously, there's been a bunch of things, but ultimately, they're the one doing the assessment. Like we believe the value of this campus is X. The data centers we have in Washington County are different in the sense that the county is primarily responsible for doing that assessment, right? And at the outset, I kind of hinted that we had moved away from one model where we just value data centers on the cost approach, meaning like how much it costs to construct them. Now we look at their lease rates, market leases, how much income can you generate from a similar size facility to value them, right? And it's probably not something we really need to go into details with, but yes, there's different ways that you can value them, but we try to use all 3 valuation approaches: a cost, market, and income approach.
But now I want to ask a question that really goes to advancements in assessment and taxation because we are one state. And I believe strongly in the multiple associations that we have, treasurers, clerks, assessors. And so learning from one another and applying best practices. So as part of follow-up, I just want to find out if across our state, we end up having one county not battling, but are there different methodologies or is there shared learning and sort of a moving together kind of model? So that's just a, a follow-up and just trying to get a general sense.
I'll include that in the follow-up.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, on that point, I just will add just briefly, since a lot of these are, if you looked at that graph about the abatement piece, a lot of these are coming online and working through their exemption period. We haven't really had the disputes about the valuation piece. That's going to be when they come out on the other side.
Yeah, you've told
So,
us about that
right.
in some
So,
previous meeting.
yeah, so it's easiest for a lot of jurisdictions, other jurisdictions, to keep them on the cost approach because they're not necessarily fights on the real market value yet. But those could be coming down the line, and which means that you can have different valuation tech opinions across a variety of jurisdictions.
And so I think as part of follow-up, just documenting for us what kind of approach we use and that once again reminding us, but putting it in writing that there can be appeals to the actual assessment in future years. And I understand that has costs to it as well, but that's part of the excellent work that you all do. Okay, are we done with this slide?
Yeah, and I guess
So-
just briefly, I mean, we can talk about the other types of data centers as well, like it's on the slide. There's co-location and multi-tenant spaces. We have those in the county as well. I would say that the difference between a colo and a hyperscale is a lot of times in hyperscale facilities, they're built to suite for one specific very large tenant, whereas obviously a co-location or a multi-tenant facility is designed for a variety of tenants, right? And we have both of those in the county. We really run the gamut of all different types of data centers that you could see, but that's exascale being in this. So that's in theory, we're talking about very, very, very large facilities, like much larger than even hyperscale facilities, which we don't have in the county at this point. But there is discussion about several 100-megawatt facilities in the future, and that would be a facility, but we do not have that in Washington County.
Does Redmond's data center approach that mechanism?
I would have to check because I'm not sure.
So I want to keep us on time.
Yeah.
So we will include in the FAQ an example of hyperscale and
Yeah.
I can't even say it.
The piece
We're going to
that
provide
was-
example of
The
that.
piece that was on OPB just last night about another area of Oregon looking at, they described it in terms of size of football fields. So it would be good to understand which of those terms goes to that size.
Yep, we'll
And
provide.
even for the existing QTS buildings, which ones fit which categories. Because I'm afraid people are hearing these news pieces and getting afraid when those situations may not actually be occurring here. So, and the other comment I want to share is we, as the CWS Board of Directors, were just alerted late last week to information that's now on the CWS website on data centers and use. And it's got some really good examples of how our everyday lives are involve data centers.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, back to now acknowledging concerns, and this is specific to data centers. And again, really just trying to share with you what we're hearing and we think you're hearing from community members, and what we've learned about some of these topics. So not suggesting that your board can address these concerns because for the most part, you probably cannot.
Well, and I think if you do have any sort of FAQ to cross-reference over to the CWS FAQ,
Yes.
might be useful as well.
And I think that's our last slide is kind of what we're building for the website. So these are helpful tips. So starting with water usage, we've already acknowledged that these data centers can be very significantly large water users. So most of our our data centers are within Hillsborough, and so looked at both Hillsborough Water District and Tualatin Valley Water District data to understand the current and near-term impacts on water in Washington County.
So what where we end up getting crosshaired with this is water intake uses versus wastewater.
Wastewater.
So, because a lot of these per CWS are closed systems.
Yeah.
So we get domestic water when they flush toilets for the bathrooms, but they don't have industrial water sewage.
And I know they've done a nice one pager, and we will make sure that that's linked on our webpage as well. So
Found the FAQ a little more useful than the one pager. But I looked at them both together.
So one thing I want to be clear is that neither Hillsborough nor Tualatin Valley Water District has a category for data center water users. So Hillsborough estimates its services in 8 different data center companies at approximately 14 sites. And their estimate is that data centers are about 1.76% of the total system-wide water demand, or 3.4% of total industrial demand. So they do separate it by residential and industrial.
That's Hillsborough.
That's Hillsborough. Tualatin Valley Water District reports that commercial water usage, because that's as close as you can come to understanding where the data centers are, that category is about 13% of the total water use, although it only accounts for about 2% of its customers. So just highlighting that, yes, they do have high water usage.
Could I just ask you a question? The 13% is all commercial water.
Correct.
Not just data centers.
Correct.
Yeah.
Across the street
Yes.
is
They do not
a
separate out.
TWD commercial customer,
So that's
but it's
part of the
not a
13.
data center.
Right.
Yes.
I'm just, and so is every other commercial property.
Yes. So that's why I was trying to be really clear. They do not have a separate category for data center. It includes all commercial property.
That's just water supply.
Yep. So electricity, there's a lot of concern that we hear from community members that the electrical needs are great, and that it is leading to increased costs of electricity for residential users. So just wanted to talk about the increased cost for residential users. So House Bill 3546, the Power Act, as it was called, was passed in 2025 and went into effect on June 16th of 2025. This directed the Public Utility Commission to provide for a classification of service for large energy users. The purpose was to ensure that the large energy users, like data centers, pay for that additional demand that's placed on the electrical grid, and that the costs are not shifted to residential households or small businesses. So Portland General Electric did file with the Utility Commission for approval, and you can see that they now are charging PGE is a rate of 29.7% increase for projects that use 20 megawatts of power, and that was approved by the Utility Commission. So in essence, this is their attempt to make sure that they're paying for their electrical needs, and that it's not being passed to residential users.
And Hillsborough gets a franchise fee on top of those rates of, I believe theirs is 5%. So that base 5% franchise fee just went up by almost 30%. And that money goes straight to their general fund. I'm just pointing that out, that we don't often talk about the community benefit that goes through that franchise fee. And I think that their base previously was around 14 million. So that's 30% on top of 14 million.
And as a reminder,
Yeah, I'm just,
no, I just wanted to put that out there for the public.
yeah, and absolutely, but I'm just pointing out too that we don't often talk about some of the benefit that comes in as well.
So moving on to noise, it's another common concern that's raised. This could be related to construction noise, rooftop cooling systems, as the chair mentioned, backup generators, diesel generators can actually reach 85 decibels, which could harm hearing. But there are often also complaints of a humming noise. I think there's a lot of variables that affect noise, including the size of the data center, the technology that they're using. Is it liquid cooling? Is it airflow, HVAC designs? And then are there other mitigating strategies like acoustic barriers or setbacks? And it really has to do with proximity and the length of exposure. So those kind of those questions are still out there. Health impacts, there are claims. You hear a lot that there are health impacts and that being near a data center increases health risk. I would say that this is really an evolving field of study. There are some known health risks associated with like air pollution from exposure to PM 2.5. If they're using diesel generators, as I mentioned, the high noise decibels could be a potential health impact on hearing. But health impacts, again, they are complex. They can vary from many factors such as exposure to the harmful effects in terms of proximity, length of exposure, and the frequency of exposure. So those there are. I went down rabbit hole after rabbit hole in looking at health impacts and those exposures. So the other that we hear quite a bit about concern about data centers is that there are high land needs and low permanent job creation, and a U.S. review of data centers found that even the largest employers typically have fewer than 150 permanent workers and sometimes fewer than 25. So some of those even echo scale that we talked about. So although they are typically fewer jobs, they are generally good paying jobs with higher than average salaries. So typically engineers, technicians, security, or facilities managers. To come down a little bit closer in Oregon, again, this is a state report, so all the same caveats that we talked about earlier, but a report from Business Oregon in January does say that the combined average employment of data centers in Oregon in the first half of 2024 was around 7,800 employees. And when they compared that to about 10 years ago, it was around 3,500 employees. So we have seen significant growth in the past decade. Again, adding that the jobs that they are adding, even though they're relatively small number, they are high paying jobs. An average annual wage for data centers in Oregon, so this is Oregon, was $172,000 in 2023. That's higher than the state average. And then they also talk about the benefits to income tax. Again, that is the backs of counties who are.
You said 173,000, not 73,000?
172,000 was the average.
For data center employment.
See, that's part of the misinformation that's being communicated. They're saying, well, it's only 102% of minimum wage. So they have to pay them $18 an hour and $19 an hour. That's just not true. They just don't do that. If you take $170,000, and what's the average wage earned in Oregon? And we don't need to get into this, but let's just say it's half of that. So 10 people in the data center environment is equal to 20 of a normal business, and I think probably half of that might be even high certainly in some jurisdictions in Oregon, and in Washington County. So you can play with the numbers all you want to, but the miscommunication has been that they are paying them 102% of minimum wage, and that is not true.
Yeah, I think that, what I learned through all of this is that it is probably accurate that there are relatively few jobs that are added, but the average salary is pretty significant compared to other employment incentives. So then we've talked a little bit about reducing land use needs. And so one of the part of what is on our thinking and here in Washington County and LUT is that as technology has advanced, how we store data is and support data, the industry is already noticing the size and the physical footprint of data storage facilities will likely be decreasing. This is based on the work to continuously reduce the size and increase the power of semiconductors. The size of chips and servers containing them have decreased significantly over time. Therefore, it's possible that in the next 5 years, the physical footprint of the buildings needed to manage and store may change. So I just think that's something that is worth keeping in mind. Additionally, there is no industry standard definition of what a data center is, which further complicates how we create local policies around this type of construction. So we've given you some of the language that's used out there, but there is no standard definition. Finally, given the rapidly changing technology, it's hard to estimate if there is property in unincorporated Washington County that could be used to develop a data center now or in the future. So that gets a little bit at the question that came earlier, that if Hillsborough is putting a moratorium, might they be pushed into the unincorporated area? Again, we haven't done a complete and thorough study, but LUT believes that there is unlikely land that would be suitable to the current, as of today, data center needs as they're understood now. So those are some of the concerns that we are hearing from community and some of our thinking at this point in Washington County. So we're getting very close, just I think 2 or 3 slides left. So legislative and policy, we have our GR team here. They've heard a lot of your comments and suggestions for future consideration. You can see on the slide, there is not a lot of clarity about future legislative work, but there are 2 avenues where reforms may come from within the next several months. So the first is the Prosperity Council and then the Data Center Advisory Committee. Washington County has worked with AOC to put information about our assessment and taxation costs to manage the enterprise zones into the Data Center Advisory Committee, and we hope to see the work that group develops. We hope that will address some of the issues that we've identified. And then lastly, just wanted to let you know that we are working with communication staff and assessment and taxation and all of the One Washington County Department participants to make sure that we have up-to-date information on our enterprise zone page on the county website, and to make sure that it's clear and easy to understand. And also we are creating more FAQs to answer some of these common questions and concerns that are raised from our community, and also linking to the information that we've received from Clean Water Services. So I tried to run through that because I know we're very over time, but
I have a couple of concerns about what you just said there, because I don't want the county to be used as a ruse for folks asking questions or looking for information with regard to the city of Hillsborough or the city of Beaverton. So I would recommend we be very careful about what is included so that it sticks to what the county's role is. I think you were very gracious in putting together a slide around acknowledging community concerns, but beyond our talking about it today, a lot of those concerns don't touch on our role. The other question I have is this presentation on slide 10, you talked about the county-wide revenue reduction, and we have that slide of dollar of property tax and how the county gets 16% of that. I think if I'm correct, it's about 16%. And so that means from 2021, using that number, the county had in 2021 $2 million of reduction. And then in 2025, $15 million. So that's
Big change.
a big change. And so I think as we go towards your second to the last slide, talking about the local government impacts, I think that's what we need to highlight is not just the overall tax abatement, what part is outside of the cities, the city in question, to represent the abatement costs for all the other taxing districts, and then put a finer point on it in terms of the county impact. So I'm not trying to squash development in the cities, but I think we need to be upfront about what the property tax abatement impact is. That's all. And give them data so that they can better understand why, and I mean the state legislators can better understand why we're having difficulty following up on our mandated work.
Well, to sharpen the pencil there, 15% of that total is somewhere around $33 million. So it's not a small number in 5 years. So
The rate of increase
Yeah.
appears to be rapid.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for giving us all this information.
Can I ask a question and a request here for the board? I appreciate your presentation, both of you. Sorry to hold you up, but I'll be quick. And I really like this slide you have and what you listed. And as the governor, Governor Tina Kotek's data center work group concludes its work and prepares its release to release the statewide recommendations, I believe Washington County must be proactively prepared for the future of data center development in a timely manner. I think there's no debate that data centers are bringing significant investment to Oregon. And as you covered some of the community concerns, Marty, they're also raising important questions about energy, water, transportation, land use, and so on and so forth. These issues will continue to shape our county for years to come. And I'm wondering that to help inform future board discussions and to move quickly at a critical point in a data center development and regulations, I'm wondering if the board is interested in convening a Washington County data center work group.
So thank you for being quick. I think that's something for a future date. We already have a work program for all of our staff that takes us out very busy through the end of this year. When there's a new board may want to contemplate what is on the county's plate and the POR and see what, if anything, they might want to deviate in order to do something different. But we already know we're fully taxed with everything we're required to do and need to do, and have no bandwidth to take on additional work. And Commissioner Snyder already said his piece. No, no, that's
A
fine.
little premature.
No, that's okay. But I think it's pretty clear where we have economic development zones in the county and where our hands are tied in terms of following the state law for processing those current economic development zones. So what you're asking is to look at something entirely different, which is in conflict, I believe, with our strategic plan. I'll just say, I'm not interested in taking up the question now in terms of everything else that's already on our plate. Which is totally separate from discussing the merits of taking it up. I don't see why we would want to deviate from what we're already doing.
I don't see any benefit at this point in time of doing that. I think we sat on the sidelines and we watched this unfold. There's plenty of activity in this already.
I think we're ready to act from a government relations perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Board can provide that direction.
Well, the other thing is our information is not complete yet. You talked about LUT doing an assessment of whether or not this could present the data center question of development could present itself. We don't have all that information yet, correct?
And we would have to deviate work from the current LUT work plan, which has already been changed and updated. There are ordinances that they have come to us on reviewing the community development code that won't come before us anymore. It's pushed into the new year. So
I would like to say that I feel it's Commissioner Snyder, you mentioned government relations, and I do think that government relations has a role as we look to the next legislative session around enterprise zones and the structure of enterprise zones as they exist and what the intention was originally, as well as a separate arm, which is how they interface with data center development. And I do think that that is within our wheelhouse to make sure that we are active in that role because we are the administrators in many cases as perceived by all those boxes. We have to do that work. So I think that it's given the fact that the enterprise zone process is ages old, data centers are relatively new, and frankly, that data centers are well capitalized without enterprise zones. And that's another thing that we have not mentioned in this discussion that I think needs to be part of how we approach that. So
the other nexus is the revenue that we're foregoing.
yes.
yeah, yep.
So are you done?
Yes.
So you want another bite at
No, I just want to
question?
No, not the question. I want to close the loop on this, Chair, if that's okay with you. And I'll be quick to make sure run the clock. Just so you guys are not off guard, I will be convening a Washington County Data Center Work Group. The purpose of this work group, stakeholder-led effort is not to duplicate the governor's work, but to evaluate those recommendations through a Washington County lens and develop a community-led and county-specific recommendations for board considerations.
No, you
I
cannot do
intend
that.
this group to create recommendations that will protect the health and economic opportunities of our county residents. And I will be doing this work as a individual commissioner for
You
District 1.
talked about doing it from a Washington County lens, and you
Yeah,
do not represent the full county.
No, but I'll repeat so that you, and please listen this time. The purpose of
Excuse
this-
me.
Yeah,
I
but
was listening.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to repeat this. The purpose
being
of
so
this stakeholder-led effort is not to duplicate the governor's work,
but to evaluate those recommendations through a Washington County lens and develop a community-led and county-specific recommendations for board considerations. I intend for this group to create recommendations that will protect the health and economic opportunities of our county residents.
Commissioner Fire, are you suggesting that you're going to do that in your individual capacity as a human being and a resident of Washington County? Or are you
As a
suggesting you're
commissioner.
going to be doing it as a commissioner on behalf of the county?
Yeah, as a commissioner, just like the same work as the when we convened the task force for the immigration.
We did not convene any such thing. You did,
I did, and I intend to do that at the same.
and you cannot use your official position for your personal gain.
This is not personal gain. This is for our residents and for the future of this county. It's time to be proactive. No more sidelines. I'm sorry.
The accusations about sideline is so off base.
I didn't make an accusation. I just said that
Yes, you
we don't
did.
want to make.
You made us, in your opinion, you just asserted that we've been staying on the sidelines. So you can't cut it both ways here.
I think you
Commissioner
should, here's my recommendation to you, Chair Harrington. I think you should go back to this exact listening video and listen the conversation that took place. And you'll know exactly why I said what I said.
It's all political.
Not
is
my
what it is.
own, like this isn't me saying that.
I
been
think,
said on this
I
table.
think what, well, at least what I'm saying, what I'm hearing is, you can do whatever you want to do as long as it's in an officify, not an officify
Commissioner,
commissioner, okay?
that's right.
And
You can't tell me what I could do or not do. I'm an equally elected
if you'd let
person.
me finish, okay? Okay? What you also cannot do is utilize county staff
Oh,
for
yeah,
any
that-
purposes.
I agree with you.
Okay,
100%.
so
Or resources.
you want to go off and do that, and if you want to use the term commissioner and all of that, well, we'll deal with that when that happens. We'll
No,
see
but
when-
you can't deal with it. I'm equally elected. Do you agree to
As long
that?
as you do not, and you state you do not represent the county.
I've never said, yeah, I agree with you, Chair.
Make sure you state that, just like I did last night, yesterday when I testified at Hillsborough.
Mhm.
Was my opening comments. It was me and me alone. I expect you to do the same thing.
Yeah, I will be convening as a commissioner for District 1, just so we're clear.
I think one of the things that I'd like to state here is that it's important for all of us, Commissioner Fye, Commissioner Snyder, Chair, Mr. Willie, to be representing clearly what the county's role is in relationship to the problems that are being proposed by the community and to the municipalities. It's really one of the things that I worry about the most is a clear understanding of what the county's role is versus what the municipalities' roles are in relationship to data centers. We should be watching and being very well versed in what's happening at the city of Hillsborough and supporting accurate, factual information so that they can portray that to the communities. The degree to which we enter into their business
Or
is
misrepresent
worrisome
their
to
business.
me, because our role is clearly around assessment and taxation only.
Per
We
Oregon
do not have an
statute.
enterprise zone. We do not have a data center. So in my role here, if I am approached, when I am approached by a community member, my role and my job is to refer them to the appropriate governmental body for their concerns. So that is why I will be continuing to say you need to be talking to Hillsborough. I talk to Hillsborough council members, to their staff if I have questions, but I do not want our job to be misconstrued. And that's what I worry about the most here. If the question is related to taxation, assessment, and our role in relationship to state law, that's fine. But that's where it starts and that's where it stops.
I agree. Thank you. That concludes my remarks.
So thank you very much for the presentation. We appreciate it. So we are going to take a 15-minute break here and reconvene at 3:10 for board and leadership communication and formal agenda item discussion. And then we will, after that, we will go to executive session. Thank you.
All right, welcome back, Commissioner. We'll reconvene and back to you, Chair Harrington.
We are back from the break and I'm still eating my chocolate chip cookie. So, to optimize time, I am going to change the agenda. We're going to have formal agenda item discussion and go over the draft letter for board direction. Then after that, we will move to executive session. And then once that executive session is done, we will reconvene in work session for the board and leadership communication. And then we know we have to be done time certain, no later than 5 o'clock or 4:45 so that we have our 45-minute minimum dinner break before our 5:30 CWS business meeting starts. So, formal agenda item discussion. We have 7 items on the consent agenda. We have 1 public hearing, and then we have 2 action items. Does anyone have any questions in advance for staff or anything else with regard to the formal agenda? Nope. I gave Commissioner Willie a heads up that I'm still dealing with jet lag from being away for a week in a different time zone. And so he's going to assist me to make sure that I won't fall on my face during the evening meeting like I felt like I did last evening at the same time. So on to the draft letter addressed to our 2 U.S. senators, Senator Ron Wyden and Senators Jeff Merkley, with regard to the Save America Act, H.R. 7296, Senate Bill 1383. We all have had the draft letter for our reading. Does anyone have any changes or corrections on that letter that you'd like to entertain?
Good letter.
Can I just make a comment? I just want to appreciate GR and Assessment and Taxation Elections Division Manager David Hamilton. Sorry, I had to close my eyes because the name wasn't quite rolling off as quickly as it will in the near future. For their quick action to this. Similar to the OMB letter that your board had submitted, really also want to give a huge shout out to the staff at NACO and the information that they are pushing out as far as federal changes and the analysis. We wouldn't have been able to do this turnaround without NACO's support. So just want to highlight NACO.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate the clarity of this letter around information that is pertinent to us here in Washington County, but as well as the effect nationally as well. Just job well done. So whose thumbs up on this letter? Okay, it's unanimous, so we're all set. Okay, at this juncture, I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2, sub F, for the purposes of discussing exempt records.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by raising your hand, saying aye. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously, 5-0. We're going to move to executive session. So